the story goes that Dr. Carl Jung, who was a Swiss psychiatrist, once had a very troubled pastor come to him looking for some help. Apparently, this pastor was very overwhelmed in his job and didn't know what to do, and so he said, well, I'm going to go get some help. Dr. Jung listened to his problems, and then he gave them kind of this prescription. He said, okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to work for 8 hours a day. You're going to limit yourself to only 8 hours a day. You're going to get 8 hours of sleep every night. And then the other 8 hours of your day, you're going to go and find a quiet place and be by yourself. The pastor said, okay, I could do that. Now, I do want to point out that obviously this pastor didn't have a family to have to help with, right, or deal with. If he did, he might not have had that family for very long if he wasn't, involved in it. Anywho, the pastor did agree to follow the plan. He worked 8 hours, and then he went into his study after those 8 hours, and he listened to music, and he read a book. The next night, he listened to new music, read another book, did that for a while. Now, eventually, he went back to Dr. Jung, and he said, look, this is not really working for me. I don't really feel a change. I still feel overwhelmed. Dr. Jung said, well, what are you doing? And after the pastor explained it, Dr. Jung said, look, that is not what I told you to do. I didn't tell you to go and be with that music and those authors. I told you to be with yourself. When the pastor heard that, he said, oh, really? Because I'm not really great company. Dr. Jung replied, and yet this is the person that you inflict on other people for 14 hours a day. Ouch, right? So I read that story and I thought that I could kind of relate to it. I understand what an overwhelming work schedule feels like. I understand filling up any empty space in my day with any and all distraction that I can find. I understand not trusting myself to be the company that I need. The other week I was driving to a meeting, and on the radio there was a report on multitasking. We all do it. I mean, I was doing it at that very moment, right? I was driving and listening to the radio at the same time. That's multitasking. We try to convince ourselves that it works, or at least I do. I mean, you all do this too, right? Yeah, okay, all right. But science is proving what we actually already knew. We are not made to do more than one thing at a time. In fact, the more we try to do at the same time, the less we actually achieve. The report described a study about what happens when we multitask. Participants played a video game where they had to follow lots of different instructions, all while listening to updates on all the different areas that they were supposed to be doing stuff. Just listening to this report, I thought, how did they do this? I could not even follow along with the report. The results showed that most people got terrible scores when they played that game. They just couldn't do all that stuff at one time. Next, the researchers had participants play the same game, but this time and I'm not even kidding you about this, they hooked up their brains to some battery pack, and they ran electricity through their brains while they played the game. They did this. I guess you can do that when you're a researcher, right? You can do things like that. Now, the results, however, were very promising. People's ability to multitask vastly improved when they had electric currents running through their brains. Now, I'm not really sure that I'm excited about these shocking results, right? The report went on to talk about how people like Dr. Jung and the author Mark Twain intentionally set aside time every day to get away to be by themselves. They did whatever they needed to do to avoid distractions and to focus. If we don't want to believe science or Mark Twain, that we need time away and we need time by ourselves, maybe we can believe Jesus. He knew a lot about being busy and trying to multitask and being distracted and all that. In today's gospel, Jesus had just spent the day teaching in the synagogue. That's what we read last week when he healed the man with the unclean spirit, if you remember that. I'm sure that Jesus was exhausted and ready for a break when he finished the day. But when he got to Simon's house, Simon's mother-in-law was sick. And so before he could do anything, he healed her. Hopefully they had time to eat. I don't even know. Hopefully they did. But as soon as the sun went down, it said the whole town surrounded the house, asking Jesus to heal them. And that's what he did well into the night. He was a busy guy. The next morning, before anyone else got up, Jesus went out to a deserted place so he could be alone with God. This was his quiet time. We don't know how long he had before the disciples literally hunted him down. That's the word they use, right? Hunted him down. But apparently it was enough time to sustain him, that focus time that he had, to sustain him for another day of ministry. So I've been setting aside Thursdays to work on my sermon and to study in the quiet of my house. When the last person goes out the door, I rejoice. They're gone. I have the house to myself. It's so beautiful. Wednesday night, Chuck stopped by my office and he said, it's really nice when you get to work at home because you don't have any distractions and you can really focus and get your work done. And he's right. Now look, I love distractions, so come on in, interrupt me when I'm at my desk. It's way more interesting than what I'm doing probably anyway. Give me a call, see how I'm doing, catch me up on your life. I love that kind of stuff. But I also know that I do need those times of quiet to focus on my relationship with God. I'm also not really great at that. Even when I set aside an entire day to focus on writing a sermon, which means I have to be listening to God, right? I let myself get distracted by emails, by the dishes, by phone calls, by more emails. It just piles on. Pretty soon I'm so overwhelmed by all the thoughts zooming around in my head that it's pretty much impossible for me to hear what God is saying to me. So I decided after a couple hours of trying to multitask on Thursday that I was going to try to be quiet and let God talk to me. I set my timer for 10 minutes. I figured I could do anything for 10 minutes, right? Right? 10 minutes? Not that long, right? So I set the timer for 10 minutes, and I shut my eyes. I was so cold. I was just so cold, and I couldn't stop thinking about being cold. And so I went up, I got up and got a blanket. And, okay, all right. And then this song kept playing in my head, and I kept saying, stop singing that song in your head. Stop. Okay, focus. And then my daughter texted me to tell me when to pick her up from basketball, and I texted her back. Okay, be quiet. And then I thought about all those things that I should be writing down on my list of, to do, and I keep putting. I think at the end of the 10 minutes, I probably quieted my brain for at least 17 seconds. I mean, a good 17 seconds, right? I mean, it's just really hard to quiet all those voices down. My goal for the next time is 19 seconds. That is small steps. Being with God takes practice, and it takes patience with ourselves. It's not easy to slow down, set aside those distractions. There's so many distractions in our world. And find our balance. But that's what we have to do. It's how we listen to what God is saying to us. It's how we gain strength and stamina to serve God and to serve each other. Even though I wasn't very successful at slowing down and being with God, I still managed to feel much calmer and much more focused for the rest of that day on just 17 seconds with God. I think 19 seconds is going to be even better. So this week, week, let me encourage you to find those moments of quiet with God. Martin Luther loved to talk about how when you take a shower, you remember your baptism, right? And so maybe take an extra minute or two. If you're a teenage girl, a minute or two. That doesn't mean 10 extra minutes in the shower. I'm just putting it out there. Teenage boys too, maybe. I don't know. Take a couple minutes. Remember your baptism. Remember that God washes us clean, that God calls us God's children. Maybe sit at your desk. Close your eyes before, and think about God before the phone rings the next time or before the class starts. Maybe you drive in, get home, instead of going right inside, sit in your car, spend a minute or two thinking about God, letting God speak to you, right? I mean, there are some simple ways that we could add this into our lives. Find those moments of quiet. Turn down your thoughts and let Jesus speak to you his message of love and grace and forgiveness. Because, the good news is that Jesus thinks we're good company.